Down in the hollow where the creek bends lazy around the old oak, there lived a peaceful little farm that everyone called the Block. The grass was sweet, the water clear, and the days rolled on, gentle as a well-fed sow's sigh. The animals there had it better than most. No wild dogs, no hard winters that lasted too long. And best of all, they had the Preachervore. The animals knew he was only one man, though it never sat easy in their minds. In the cool of the morning, he moved among them as the pastor, voice soft as new hay, hands gentle when he scratched behind ears or pulled a thorn from a hoof. He spoke of green pastures beyond this one, of a higher table where no one went hungry and no one was ever afraid. The young ones especially loved to gather round him then, eyes wide, dreaming of that far meadow. But come slaughter day, and slaughter day always came, the same man tied on a heavy apron that had seen more blood than the creek had seen rain. Then he was the butcher, steady and unflinching, knife flashing quick and clean. He never lied to them about it. "It has to be done," he'd say as he led the chosen one away. And after the work was finished, when the air smelled of iron and hot water, he'd sit on the block itself with a cup of coffee and become the carnivore, patient, watchful, chewing slowly while the rest of the herd stood at a respectful distance, trying not to stare at what remained of their neighbor. One crisp autumn afternoon, a young ram named Gideon grew restless. He had listened to the pastor's words since he was a tiny lamb, but he had also watched too many of his cousins disappear behind the barn door and never come back the same. Gideon tossed his curling horns and trotted up to the Preachervore while the man was sharpening steel on the old whetstone. "The Preachervore," Gideon said, trying to sound braver than he felt. "I've been chewing on something all season. You tell us you love us like a shepherd loves his sheep. You speak of mercy and a higher pasture. Yet when the time comes, your hand is the one that holds the knife. How can the same heart comfort us one day and bleed us the next? It don't add up in my head." The Preachervore looked up from his blade, eyes calm, a little smile playing at the corner of his mouth, like he'd been waiting for the question. He wiped the stone dust from his hands and sat down on an upturned bucket so he was closer to Gideon's level. "Well now, Gideon," he drawled in that slow, porch-sitting way of his, "that's a fair knot you're trying to untie. Let me ask you something first. When you butt heads with the other young rams in the spring, are you trying to kill them or just see who's strongest?" Gideon stamped a hoof. "That's different. That's natural." The Preachervore nodded. "And when the spotted sow over there roots up the garden and I have to mend the fence, do I stop feeding her? Or do I still scratch her back when she lets me?" The young ram shifted uncomfortably. "You still feed her." "Exactly." The Preachervore leaned forward, voice dropping a notch, warm but serious. "I am not three different men, son. I am one. The part of me that speaks comfort knows the part that wields the knife. The part that eats knows the cost of every bite. You want a shepherd who only pets and never prunes? That shepherd starves the flock in the end. You want a butcher who never feels the weight? That butcher becomes cruel. And the carnivore? He just watches and remembers that nothing in this world lives without something else laying its life down." A wise old cow named Mabel had wandered over, chewing her cud really slow and thoughtful. She had seen many seasons and many knives.
"I've heard you say the higher pasture waits for all of us,"
she said in her deep, patient voice.
"Yet some of us go through your hands to get there sooner than others. Is the higher pasture only for the ones who end up on the block?"
The Preachervore chuckled softly, the sound carrying a touch of sadness and something like affection. "Mabel, the higher pasture isn't earned by how long you stay in this one. Some animals live long and quiet lives here. Others give themselves sooner so the rest can keep grazing. The mystery is that the same love holds both. The hand that comforts and the hand that cuts belong to the same arms. One without the other would be a lie." Gideon lowered his head, horns catching the late sun.
"But it still hurts to watch, and it still scares me when my turn gets closer."
"It should," the Preachervore said quietly. "Fear keeps a creature honest. But remember this, when I lead one through the door, I walk with them. I don't send them alone. The blood that flows isn't wasted. It feeds the ground, it feeds the others, and in ways you can't see from this side of the fence, it feeds something even higher. The pasture beyond isn't free of cost. It was bought with the same kind of giving." The carnivore part of him took another slow bite of the sandwich he'd made earlier, chewing deliberately while the animals watched. He didn't hide the meat, he never did. Mabel swished her tail.
"So, we're all just meat in the end?"
The Preachervore wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and looked at her with eyes that seemed older than the oak. "You're more than meat, Mabel, but you're never less than it either. That's the hard part of living on the block. The kindness and the severity live in the same man, the comfort and the cost, the promise and the price. You can fight that tension, or you can learn to stand inside it. Most animals spend their whole lives trying to pick one side and pretend the other don't exist. The wise ones learn to trust the one hand that does both." As the sun dipped lower, painting the barn red, Gideon and Mabel stood quiet. The Preachervore rose, hung the apron back on its peg, and gave Gideon one last scratch behind the horns, the same gentle hand that had sharpened steel only minutes before. "Keep chewing on it, young ram," he said with a wry little grin. "Just don't choke on the bone of it. Some questions are meant to be carried, not solved." And with that, the Preachervore walked toward the house, leaving the animals in the fading light. Some still dreaming of the higher pasture, others staring at the block and wondering whose turn was next, and all of them feeling deep in their bones that the man who loved them most was also the one who would one day ask everything of them.